Greetings and welcome everybody to a brand new Terra Adventure podcast. Anthony Mars Jr. on PR Lost Galaxy 2014 with Terra Adventure Podcast episode 308. Presented by PR Lost Galaxy 2014's Facebook and Instagram pages, and also hashtag PR Lost Galaxy 2014 and my Morphin Megaverse Power Rangers Facebook group. Haven't seen any? Check them out now. I want to show you guys a story about, this has to do to something about Power Rangers. For years, ever since I started doing these podcasts and stuff, and in terms of when I started talking about the TV show side of things about Power Rangers, you know, as much as I've been talking too much crap, bashing on people's nostalgia for Mighty Morphin, and as well as talking every now and then about Zeo Turbo in Space, talked every now and then a lot about my favorite season, about Lost Galaxy, little to so about Lightspeed Rescue through Wild Force, and as much as I've been on the other Saban side of things with mostly the Neo Saban era, since that's the more recent, out of all Power Ranger eras of the 25 years, since this is the 25th anniversary year, guys, out of all the 25 years of Power Rangers that I have been through, I have never did talked about the Disney era. If you have watched my 3-hour-long History of Power Rangers video podcast that I put out early this month in January, if you start at the timestamp where I started ranting about Ninja Storm, this is where I, up until the end of RPM. If you go by the timestamps for Ninja Storm through RPM, then you'll know exactly what I was going through with these Disney seasons. And I'll give you my personal insight and my personal thoughts on the Disney era as a whole here today. For some reason, since this year is the 15th anniversary of Power Rangers' Disney era, starting with also this is the 15th anniversary of its first season of that era, Ninja Storm, and ended 9 years ago with RPM. I never did like some of the things Disney was doing as soon as Power Rangers as soon as Disney got Power Rangers, and between the buyout between Saban and Disney. And now, admittedly, for those who may not know, Wild Force, which was part Saban and part Disney, for some reason this fandom is like in shambles with Wild Force, has been in shambles with Wild Force for the last 15 years. And I think 15 years later, since its original airing, I think Wild Force should deserve, like I said before until I took that retrospective video down because of some copyright crap on my channel, I think Wild Force should deserve more love than it deserves. But for the Disney seasons, it seems as though that the more I watch the Disney seasons, I gotta realize there was actually more good than there was bad. Because I know that we have now entered the Neo Saban era for 7 years now since Samurai, and here we are with Super Ninja Steel coming up. At the time I recorded this was Friday, January 26th, which was less than 24 hours before Super Ninja Steel started, the 27th Saturday. And I just had to realize the Disney era, as much as I didn't care about it at first when I was younger, I realized there was more to the Disney era than there was less. Because when Disney had Power Rangers, and I know many people have said this, excuse that sound in the between it, don't mind that. You see, when Disney had Power Rangers, I didn't care for a lot of things they did. There were some between Ninja Storm through RPM, there were, like I've said before, over and over, time and time again with my history with this franchise in terms of the Disney years when Disney had it. I didn't like some of the Rangers. I didn't like some of the villains. I didn't like some of the things general they did, like give the Rangers civilian powers. I didn't like Bruce Kalish as executive producer in terms of him putting, Kalish explosions, and which had ingrained much worse later on by Operation Overdrive, until they meddled out better by Jungle Fury. And you see, we had some seasons that were underrated in the Disney era, like Mystic Force and Jungle Fury, because, for some reason, it's like Mystic Force, when that came out, I was not feeling the whole Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings-ish vibe with Power Rangers, knowing that, yes, we know that since Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, there has been a dynamic between magic versus technology, even though Linkara has rebutted this a bunch of times in the history of Power Rangers, in terms of what's magic and what is technology. Whereas Mystic Force is all magic for both sources of good and evil with their powers. You know, good and evil both having magic, you know, all magic. Jungle Fury, I mean, it tried to be something, and I know this year is 10 years since Jungle Fury aired and ended, and I really think Jungle Fury should deserve more love than it should. Because with Disney's Power Rangers, Ninja Storm, Dino Thunder, SPD, Mystic Force, Operation Overdrive, Jungle Fury, and definitely RPM. The Mighty Morphin 2010 reversion that we had 8 years ago at this point in 2010 does not count. That was just something that they should have never tampered with 8 years ago. Now, I gotta tell you in thorough about my deep history about these Disney seasons. Again, and for those who haven't heard what I said in that video that I did early in the month, kicking off the 25th anniversary celebration of this franchise. You see, as soon as Power Rangers Ninja Storm came along, I knew there was going to be a change of scope and differences from the Saban seasons to Disney. Because as soon as when Power Rangers started airing on various, Disney-owned networks like ABC Family, ABC, with ABC Kids, and then later starting with Dino Thunder 14 years ago was Jetix and Toon Disney. Then all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm not going to like this. I said this to myself over 15 years ago when Ninja Storm was airing. Now, admittedly, in my initial watch of Ninja Storm when it was airing, I actually enjoyed some of the things they did in Ninja Storm. The things I didn't like out of Ninja Storm, that's if I will ever do the retrospective for it on YouTube before I get, I'll discuss the update about that sometime later. But anyway, some of the aspects I didn't like about Ninja Storm was the tongue-in-cheek comedy, because despite it, they wanted to do a much lighter-hearted season of the show, whereas previous seasons, until Wild Force, was pretty dark and had very sympathetic, mature storylines. I didn't like Ninja Storm for, the villains, and I definitely did not like, later on down the road of the series, they would, for the fight scenes and stuff, they would have public domain stock music. And I'm like, why do we need public domain stock music for background music in Power Rangers? Are you saying that you don't have the budget to compose your own music, Disney? I mean, you were doing well with all that rock and, such extreme music you guys were going for in the background when the Ninja Storm Rangers would do something awesome in the earlier episodes. But it seemed like by the time we get to the third part of the Thunder Ranger saga and up until the end of Ninja Storm, then they start having all that public domain stock music in the background, which I would later hear in various movies and TV shows and cartoons that would use that music sometimes. Like, for example, sometimes in South Park or video games like, I don't know, some Jurassic Park game back when we had PlayStation 2 and stuff. I mean, Ninja Storm and Dino Thunder, like I said in that video, if you watched it, I was a preteen between the ages of 10 to 12 when they came out. When SPD came out, I was 13, becoming a teenager in middle school. In the 6th, 7th, grade-ish. Overdrive through Jungle Fury, not Jungle Fury. Jungle Fury is part of that. But Overdrive through RPM, I was between the high school years of the 9th to the 11th grade. And you guys know that the 2010 reversion of Mighty Morphin again doesn't count. I was in my senior year in high school, or was beginning my senior year in high school, because around this time 8 years ago, I was still in the 11th grade in 2010. Around the second semester time of when the 2010 revision, when we didn't have no new Power Ranger season, because Disney canceled the show. And as soon as when the fall of 2010 came, and when we heard about all this news about as soon as Saban was coming, Haim Saban was coming back, and then Saban Brands was established, and getting Power Rangers back in reacquisition of the franchise from Disney, and then that's why we got the Neo Saban era 7 years today, 7 years later today, with Samurai up until Super Ninja Steel, and with the show being on Nickelodeon and stuff. You see, I do think that the Disney era did have its bright spots with the fandom when I look back on it. I would rather take the Disney era over the Neo Saban era, in my opinion, yes, any day. Because with Disney, they at least had like 9 or 10 additional episodes after we go past 20 episodes of Power Rangers. After the initial 20 episodes. Even though one of the things I didn't like, which I'd rather take over the 2-season 20 episode thing we got with the show on Nickelodeon these days, I'd rather stick with 32 episodes for a whole year and not freaking like the Neo Saban era with 2 seasons and 20 episodes a year. Which is, to me, in my opinion, better than what we already got with, the Neo Saban and Nickelodeon with Power Rangers. Because, that's one of the, even though there was some crimes and some things I didn't like about Disney for years that I had to look back on, even though I have to, open up and cut the Disney era, Ninja Storm through Overdrive some slack. That they actually did do some good things with the era, amidst of the fact that Disney never really cared for Power Rangers. But the real truth is, the real truth behind it all, and everybody's been saying this, and this is the first time I even had to say it, first time in a video, I think. Disney never did care about Power Rangers. They never did care about it. All Disney cared about was whatever they had at the time during the 2000s by 2002, 2003-ish, okay? Around the time when Disney was doing all these direct-to-DVD, earlier on VHS sequels to their most beloved animated classics, even they even did some of those direct-to-video sequels to their classic films in the late 90s, starting with Lion King 2 and Pocahontas 2. But I digress. But as soon as Disney got Power Rangers, I was like, well, I didn't think that as soon as I've noticed that as soon as when Wild Force started, I've noticed something. The first thing I took notice long ago, and even for years later, is that Wild Force does not have Saban's name in the logo, and it's not billed as Saban's Power Rangers Wild Force. It's just Power Rangers Wild Force, whether if it's either by Saban or it's by Disney. Because you see, around the time when Wild Force was airing, it was produced between the last of Saban Entertainment / MMPR Productions era with what the BVS, aka the Disney era. So that's how it all came down to be. Buena Vista, or let's say, I would say Buena Vista, BVS probably does stand for Buena Vista and Saban Entertainment, I guess. Whatever. So that's how it went down from there. And then after Wild Force ended, then they, of course, they moved Power Rangers to New Zealand since 15 years ago, starting with Ninja Storm. And since Ninja Storm, for the last 15 years now, they've been filming in New Zealand for the last 15 years now. Come to the exact. Can you believe that? Because after Wild Force concluded, we've been having the show over there in New Zealand, because you see, with New Zealand, now, not that I don't like the actors from New Zealand that has been in these various Power Ranger seasons since Ninja Storm, lately for the last 15 years, up until right now, Super Ninja Steel, another Ninja theme season, but also a continuation of another, of the same Ninja season that we still have for 2 seasons on Nick. But I just really think that once Super Ninja Steel, I think we need to see some changes once Super Ninja Steel ends. Now, not that as much as I still don't care about Ninja Steel and its Super season starting tomorrow, again, at the time of this video again, I just think that Power Rangers needs to move back to the United States. It doesn't have to be in California, because I rather want to see Power Rangers move somewhere where its production could be cheaper, because, the United States, things were fine over here in the States when they were filming it. But again, I don't live in California where the show is taking place. I'm living elsewhere. But the thing is, they've been in New Zealand for 15 years. So I really want to see them move Power Rangers back here to the United States. They have to find a way to cheapen the budget of the show because, knowing the show, Power Rangers has always been known as a cost-dependent show. So they need to bring the show back over here. If that's ever. And again, like I said, it doesn't have to be in California. You can bring it. You can move the production to the show to Canada because Canada's cheap. So why not in Canada? You film. I mean, hey, Saban, if you filmed that reboot movie in Canada, find another location so that way you won't, whatever, or find somewhere. Because New Zealand, I mean, there's not much acting talent in New Zealand you can find to be on something like Power Rangers. So, and then I noticed about the quality of the show too. When I was watching the Disney seasons initially, also, whenever I see when I see the Rangers fighting and stuff, I'll give you this. I did like one of the aspects I kind of do look back on in the Disney era in retrospect. I actually do like the fact that as much as I never did care about the Disney era. There was this one thing, one of the few other things I actually liked that was a positive of that era. Disney actually gave the audacity to shoot their own footage of them using whatever Sentai suits for Power Rangers that they were adapting of the following seasons for Ninja Storm through RPM at the time, film their own stuff so they don't have to, but even though one of the things that I kept hearing from fans and even from what I've been hearing from stories about what Disney was doing when they were in control with the show, they kept telling longtime producers like Jackie Marchand and Koichi Sakamoto and others to simply dub Sentai with just all footage from Sentai, but we can still call it Power Rangers Ninja Storm by using all Hurricane Ranger footage, even with the Rangers unmorphed. Why you want to do that? I mean, Disney. See, this is where I get to the downsides of Disney here. Aside from what I was saying earlier, until I got my pieces of my rant mixed up here, is that Disney should realize that Power Rangers is an American adaptation, not an American translation of the Sentai. Okay, you don't just take the whole Super Sentai series, but also omitting some unnecessary and violent stuff from Sentai, and then dub it with just American voices and nothing more. You got to have a balance of American footage with American actors in the and even in costume, with Japanese Sentai footage in between the shots. That's how Power Rangers work. I mean, if Disney would play their cards right of what they saw from what Saban did with, since Mighty Morphin through Time Force, part Wild Force, then they should realize with Ninja Storm through RPM, they need to do the exact same opposite of balancing the two, footage ratios of what is American and what is Japanese. Because what Disney was doing was so stupid and retarded, and I hate to say this one, I really hate to say this word, retarded, because they think that simply dubbing the Sentai could actually make Power Rangers a different show under their control. I call bullshit on that one. You see, that's one of the reasons why I was like, okay, see, this is probably one of the reasons why I never did care about what Disney was doing with Power Rangers. They just want to simply dub the Sentai. That's what I've been hearing from stories from, like, what I've heard from fans, and even from what I heard from what Linkara said in terms of ranting about, the Disney seasons during his history of Power Rangers on, like, Overdrive and Jungle Fury and stuff, RPM. And kept hearing that story over and over, that every time, all Disney wanted to do, and even if they don't care for the franchise, they just simply wanted to dub the Sentai because it's more cheaper than producing our own American footage with American actors and even some of our New Zealand actors to, dub over the Japanese footage. And it's stupid. But anyway, like I said about the positives though, but we'll get more into the negatives later. One of the things I didn't like, one of the things I did like about the American, the show that from the Disney era, I did like the fact they did shot their own American, like, I think I did say that. Yeah. I did like the fact that when you look at some of the fight scenes in Ninja Storm, Dino Thunder, SPD, all the way to RPM, so forth, I do like the fact they had the audacity and somewhat the money to film their own footage, with them using Hurricaneger, Aba Ranger, Deca Ranger, Maji Ranger, etc. suits, while they also did use the Sentai footage when needed to. Heck, most of the time they shot mostly more American stuff than used the Sentai stuff. Because I know maybe if I was to watch Hurricaneger or Aba Ranger or Maji Ranger or Goanger, I bet you there was some violent and some inappropriate stuff that we would not see in Power Rangers in their shows. Well, we'll find out eventually once when Shout Factory gets past Go-Go 5 and such, and when they do the Sentais that Ninja Storm through RPM was adapted from after they do the Gal Ranger DVD release here in the United States in the future soon, and when they release Hurricaneger, then I'll see for myself eventually. Even though with the exception of the fact we all had the exposure of a full-on episode of Aba Ranger, adapted into Power Rangers and Dino Thunder in that very infamous Lost and Found in Translation episode, but I'll talk about that some other day. But you see, when, now Ninja Storm and Dino Thunder, I was a preteen, 11 through 12 when those came out. Okay, but when I was a teenager in middle school, when the Disney era came out, I'm getting this mixed up now. Sorry, guys. You see, when I was a teenager in middle school, in high school, between SPD through RPM, I realized that Disney had no freaking faith in Power Rangers and what they were doing with the characters and what they were establishing with the status quo during the era. And then when they had a particular, well-famous, somewhat executive producer and stuff that did some directing credits and stuff in television prior to Power Rangers, Bruce Kalish, and when they brought him along, I knew there was something about this era, within an era, that I did not like. I mean, by this point, this is when they started cutting the amount of episodes in half to only 32 episodes rather than 38. They had kept, they were for the fight scenes that would have Bruce Kalish have, the explosion crew that would work on the explosions and stunt work, wire work and stuff for the show would have, the same amount of the same Kalish explosion effect when the characters are being blown off or whatever, and even with front and back explosions. And I just really what are they trying to do with this show? And then one of the things I didn't like about the Disney era is the way how, I guess it had to do with some of the acting, I guess. Some of the acting earlier on in the Disney era was not all that great, but I have to realize I'd rather take the bad acting from the early half of the Disney era over all the bad acting in the Neo Saban era any day. Again, as well. Because, you see, when we had the Kalish era from Ninja SPD through the end of Jungle Fury, I did not like this other aspect I didn't like from this era within an era. When it came to episode titles, and this is what actually did bugged me, SPD's episode titles had one word, sans part 1, part 2-ish, when they do a 2 or multi-parter episode. Mystic Force had 2 words. Overdrive had 3 words, and Jungle Fury was 4. I don't see why is that. I didn't like... What is it I didn't like about Disney again with what they did with Power Rangers? I realized how much they didn't put much respect to Power Rangers whatsoever as soon as they got their hands on this franchise. And you see, I realized, people like, any of my favorite Power Ranger YouTube channels like Rick on the Onyx Tavern was right. I watched his Disney Sucks video, guys. I don't want to repeat some of the same things he did, but I'll paraphrase some of the things he mentioned about what Disney could have did with some extra potential for Disney to do with Power Rangers and what they probably should have done now that they've already did with Marvel and Star Wars. and to some degree with the Muppets and stuff until they probably, I think they might have lost the rights to the Muppets or something. I don't know. But, for some reason, Disney could have had so much more with Power Rangers. Why did they have to stop? I mean, I would love to see what they could have done to Samurai, Megaforce, Dino Charge, and Ninja Steel. But Disney was like, no, we're done with Power Rangers. We don't want nothing to do with this show. Because the show sucks. And it's, I guess they're probably also saying their fan base sucks. And the show is only designed to sell toys. That is just meaningless. Well, hey, you can sell. Why you think years later? Why the hell you all of a sudden right now with the Disney princesses or anything? Why you still sell like a gazillion freaking things dedicated to Frozen and shit right now? Then, huh? Or what about Star Wars right now with Force Awakens, Rogue One, Last Jedi for merchandise? I mean, hell, look at what you've been doing so far with Marvel with the amount of toys for Spider-Man Homecoming, the Black Panther, upcoming Infinity War, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and stuff, and the Avengers. And even outside of that with the Marvel cartoons like Ultimate Spider-Man with its toys and stuff. You've been doing so well with that, but when you had Power Rangers, you didn't want nothing to do with it. See, that's one of the reasons why I never liked the Disney era back when I was in the time as a teenager when I was like, everything sucks. Everything the kids watch sucks. Kid shows are gay and stupid. Well, that's kind of like how, teenagers during my generation back in the mid to late 2000s back then, guys. Just, it's figure of speech. Because I've noticed that for the longest time, even if I don't like what Power Rangers is doing like right now with the Neo Saban era, but I have to appreciate what Disney was doing. Disney could have had all that potential with Power Rangers as soon as they got it. They should have. I mean, instead of them doing all that horrible shit they did to Power Rangers since Ninja Storm up until the end of RPM, now with the exception of the fact RPM was a creative success despite what was going on behind the scenes with that season and stuff, and the toys and the show's ratings when it was broadcast at first. They could have did more with Power Rangers as soon as I knew that they were going to do something with this franchise that after Wild Force I was not going to like at all. I was like, okay, so as soon as Disney got Power Rangers. Now, I know this was, again, long before what they're doing right now with Marvel and Star Wars. But, when they had this franchise, my favorite franchise, the one that I've been a fan of for 25 years, it's just much like the rest of you guys watching, they could have had so much potential. They could have embraced that potential of what they would do later on with Marvel and Star Wars with Power Rangers. Because it seems as though that Power Rangers is that franchise that's a niche that, yes, it has a small fan base. Yes, it's a show that's mostly designed to sell toys. It's not the only purpose to it. Power Rangers is like many kid shows and many TV shows in general that have told great stories, developed great characters. But you don't want to exceed that potential with those characters when you could have did a ongoing cinematic universe and stuff. And I know that I'm taking notes from Rick from his Disney Sucks video, guys. Now, I know I'm, giving special thanks to Rick for putting out that video so I could, do my rebuttal of this kind of discussion here. Because I realized even further when it came to potential what they could have did with, like for Power Rangers again, for the movies. Before Saban did that reboot movie with Lionsgate, and then look what happened, the movie bombed. But if Disney did the Power Rangers reboot, like what would later happen with Saban and Lionsgate, but Disney could have, unlike Saban, I'm sorry to hate to keep bashing on for those who like the 2017 film, because I'll discuss my further thoughts on that movie later, when it's been a one year anniversary after the movie came out soon. March. Disney could have did Power Ranger movies. They had that open opportunity. They didn't want to do that. They can only belittle the show that they could by giving us a crappy 15th anniversary by Overdrive, and that was it. that was the only thing they did when they cared about the show. When they partnered with Bandai to do something related to what was called Super Legends, in 2007, 10 years ago. And I was like, okay, is this all you got, Disney? Heck, I mean, when it came to Power Ranger movies, but which I'll probably discuss when I bring this up in the future installment, they could have did Power Ranger movies that was either, like a bridging between each season, leading to the next. Kind of like what Turbo Power Rangers movie could have been, where it was a bridge between the end of Zeo beginning Turbo kind of thing. Disney could have did that. I mean, and like again with the cinematic universe thing, like what they're already doing with Star Wars and Marvel again. They could have did much with Power Rangers by making movies that is like what they would have did with Marvel. Take Power Rangers and do a blueprint, which you could have did with Power Rangers, and do it for Marvel and give Marvel all this great stuff and Star Wars some great stuff. Sans to the fact that, not many people, I know that many people really hate the new one right now, The Last Jedi, at the time of this recording of this video, but they could have did so much more with this franchise when they could have did movies. Heck, there could have been more of something for Power Rangers, like, instead of with the amount of episodes they gave us for the following year, starting with Mystic Force, why, instead of 32 episodes, why couldn't you did at least 45 episodes to match up with the same amount of episodes that their Sentai counterparts had, or something? Why couldn't we go, instead of 32 episodes a year since Mystic Force until RPM, why 32 episodes? Oh, you just want to slash the budget in half and just tell the franchise to go fuck itself. That's what I think it was. Yeah, exactly. Actually, for the longest time, I think that I've realized since it's been 15 years since Disney, broadcast Power Rangers on their various, networks like ABC, ABC Family, but ABC Family is gone now since it's now ABC Family is now called Freeform, even though I don't watch cable and satellite anymore. But I think Disney was basically saying to us Power Ranger fans and telling the show in itself and franchise overall that Power Rangers needs to go fuck itself. And that really pissed me off. And it really did. There were some characters, from some seasons that I've said over and over a bunch of times I didn't like per season. Now, admittedly, here's how I'm going to break it down with what characters I liked per the seasons of this era. Ninja Storm, I did like all 6 Ninja Storm Rangers. But if I would go ahead and say what was my favorite character of that bunch, would have to be Tori. I guess it's obvious because she was our very first female Blue Ranger, I guess. That's why I like Tori, the surfer girl. I mean, Cam was great as a tech assistant in Green Ranger, even though he was a snarky asshole earlier and even probably a little later. But Shane and Dustin were good. Hunter and Blake was also good. But again, of all the characters in Ninja Storm I didn't like were the villains. And I've said before, never liked it Lothor. I didn't like his nieces, Capri and Mara. They were annoying as all hell. Shubo was stupid. He was like a low rate, dumbed down, watered down Elgar meets Rito, but just stupid. But actually, the villains that I did like from Ninja Storm, and I've said this a couple times in some discussions related to Disney seasons and their power and their villains, that when it came to Ninja Storm's villains, the only villains I liked from Ninja Storm was Zergane, Vexicus, Motodrome, that Green Goblin looking, character, and Shimatsu, somewhat. Dino Thunder. Outside of Tommy, the new characters. I know Tommy's a veteran among Power Rangers fans, and knowing that he's among the franchise, he's one of the longest running Rangers ever in the franchise. But in terms of Dino Thunder, in terms of new characters, now I hate to say this, guys, about the character of Kira, the Yellow Ranger from Dino Thunder. You see, guys, I never did give a crap about Kira. I never really did. The emo punk, the emo punk girl that is friends with Connor and Ethan and Trent. I'm sorry, guys, because I don't care how great Kira is of a character to you guys, but she was never all that great to me. I mean, I can never understand, how is Kira a great Yellow Ranger? I mean, she was just bland and pointless, and yeah, go ahead and ripple me if you will, say what you will about what I said about her, if for those who are fans of her character. Whereas, now, Connor was an okay Red Ranger. I did like Ethan. Trent was alright. And the villains were great. Even though Elsa, is, Principal Randall. I never guessed that Elsa would be, as the principal earlier on when she would, every now and then when she was the principal, shape-shifting into that, she could be a bitch sometimes. Whereas I did like Mesogog and Zeltrax as villains. SPD is a little bit divisive for me in terms of the characters, because for years since SPD now, 13 years in, after it ended, for years, I have always hated the character of Sky Tate. He is one of the worst Blue Rangers ever. And the reason why I consider him worst is because of his attitude and how of a jerk he is. And basing on that prejudicial edge toward between him and Jack. And, because, basically, now, if I was a writer on SPD, I would have made Sky the Red Ranger from the get-go. And make Jack the Blue Ranger. How cool would that have been? Because, yeah, I know in the show, Jack is the Red Ranger and Sky's the Blue Ranger. Because one of the things I've always hated about SPD was Sky. He's one of the few reasons why I never cared about SPD that much. Because even, I have to say, because when I just think about how much of a self-centered jerk wanted to live up to, but I understand he wanted to live up to his father's shoes of being Red Ranger. Because, we all know Sky's backstory to what made him be part of SPD, the Space Patrol Delta, is, he said this for years. I mean, ever since he was a kid, seeing his father join the SPD while wearing the Time Force Red costume, I mean, he kept saying that he always wanted, like his dad, he always, Sky has always wanted to be the Red Ranger. But as soon as he was part of B Squad, and stuff, as soon as they got their morphers with Bridge and Z, Sydney, while, Z and Jack were criminals and then later became Rangers, but as soon as, they morphed for the first time, as soon as when Sky became a Ranger, he could have been the Red Ranger, but they assigned him Blue. See, it doesn't really matter what color you get, Sky. As long as you're a Power Ranger, it doesn't matter what color you're given, be that Ranger, and stop bitching and whining about it. Or being an arrogant jerk about it. I never liked the character of Sid. She was too much of a Paris Hilton Barbie girl wannabe. That's all. Now, I do like the character. I do love the character of Bridge. The buttery dude. Z, she is one of my favorite Yellow Rangers from that season. Jack is okay of a Red Ranger. I don't have nothing. Not that I don't like Jack, but Commander Doggy Kruger, he's one of my favorite mentors and also a auxiliary ranger. Cat Manx, tech assistant, one-time ranger, says she never was Cat Ranger for more than she could. And the Omega Ranger, even though he's the ball of light, the only thing I like about the Omega Ranger, looking back in retrospect, I only like the Omega Ranger for his costume. Yeah, he didn't have that much of a character because he was a ball of light, because they couldn't, because you see, Disney, this is where they pulled off that bullshit excuse. They couldn't find an actor to be in the Omega Ranger, so we made him a ball of light. So, yeah, money calls. I don't know what my thoughts are about the A Squad, because you see, as much as for someone like me who's been too much of a nostalgia tart for the original Saban era, with like in space with the Psycho Rangers, you see, as great, I don't care how great the A Squad was, even if they were the best of SPD and all that, and evil Power Rangers, but they just can't beat the Psycho Rangers for me. I'm sorry. Even if, yeah, I was glad they made the SPD A Squad Red Ranger a female, the very first female Red Ranger, but we didn't technically, well, even though, yeah, SPD's A Squad Red is the first female, but she was an evil Power Ranger. She wasn't good. The first official good female Red Ranger didn't come to fruition until later on in the Neo Saban era with Samurai with Lauren, Jaden's sister. Mystic Force. Okay. Oh yeah, I skipped some characters. Well, Grum, I liked as a villain. He was the only villain I cared about. Broodwing and Mora didn't do anything for me. Mystic Force was convoluted, and you see, like I said, I didn't care for Mystic Force that much. When I was, as soon as I did watch bits of Mystic Force, but I just didn't care for it. But though I do hate the character of Nick. Nick is one of the worst Red Rangers we've had in this franchise. Before Mac, before Troy, before Jaden, and even Brody. Enough said. The only characters I liked it from Mystic Force was Udana, Xander, Chip, Genji to a degree. But there was just too many peripheral characters to focus on for Mystic Force. I didn't care much for the Mystic Force girls of Madison and Vita. I've said this many times before. The villains, it's not much to talk about them, but I did like Necrolai, but then I came to realize, with her. But other than that, I just didn't care for Mystic Force that much. Now you know my deal with Operation Overdrive. Now, the only characters I actually liked from Overdrive was Rose, Tyzon, Andrew Hartford, and Spencer. Everybody else can go suck it. Especially Mac and Dax and Will. Especially Will and Dax, because they were, oh my god, Dax was annoying and Will was just so full of himself. Even like his actor in real life, Samuel Benta, Will is just so full of himself and is not to be trusted. Jungle Fury, I did like all 5 Jungle Fury Rangers plus the Spirit Rangers, and I know I made the joke about the whole first time having old ass geezers as Power Rangers. I have to respect my elders on that one. RPM, you know my deal. I do like the characters of Jem and Gemma, Flynn, Summer, Dylan to a degree, Scott somewhat, Ziggy I don't like, Dr. K is, Venjix is the only villain I liked, and Tanaya is my most hated. So, you see, here's some of the things that's just one of the few things how I break it down, how I feel about the Disney seasons. It's just that, in terms of characters, there's only a few characters and a few things I cared about Disney, because, from Disney's Power Rangers, because they can go either way if I like what they did or hate the things they did. Sure, yeah, there were some things I personally don't like from RPM myself, in terms of referential humor. And I definitely don't like some of the things Overdrive did in terms of what they were doing, making the Rangers cocky assholes, assholes who don't want to be Power Rangers, don't want to save the world, and just want to be self-centered jerks. And that's one of the reasons why when we got Once a Ranger, and that's why it's one of the worst team-up episodes in all of Power Rangers, and one of the worst ways to honor 15 years of a franchise. And I think Once a Ranger was a statement that Disney had, was like, well, we're not doing this crap no more, this team-up crap. It sounds stupid. It seems like they wanted to kill all the good things that was a tradition since Lost Galaxy A Saban season. And it seems as though that's one of the reasons why I'm like, they don't want to do team-up episodes, because the excuse of the whole fact, well, we already know the reasons why Ninja Storm didn't have a team-up with Wild Force, is because since the show moved to New Zealand, they, the actors behind, the actors that were part of Wild Force, it wouldn't be possible flying them down to New Zealand with them, and knowing that Ninja Storm was originally believed to be its own continuity, when knowing that's something that's just hard to say, to believe, and why would they do something like that? And the reason why Mystic Force, Jungle Fury, and RPM didn't have crossovers, we know Mystic Force's crossover, could have happened with SPD, but the difference is the fact is Mystic Force and SPD's, powers are different, and the fact that SPD is from the future with their technology is futuristic and too advanced for Mystic Force to handle with them, and that's why, and also with the short series length, for both, for Mystic Force all the way to RPM. And Jungle Fury didn't, it was hard to tell whether if Jungle Fury was in prime continuity or not. So that's one of the reasons why it was like hard in the debacle if Jungle Fury was his own thing or so. And we all know the reason why RPM didn't have a crossover with any Power Ranger season until Samurai. It wasn't until later, until we got to Neo Saban era territory with Samurai, with Clash of the Red Rangers. And that's one of the reasons why I'm like, okay, well, even though I'm still pissed to this day that the reason why we only had the Red RPM Ranger and not the rest of the RPM Rangers to team up with Samurai, when knowing Shinkenger versus Go Andra fully happened, so yeah, you mean to tell me you can't bring none of the Samurai Rangers back? I mean, not Samurai, RPM? So it's like, what's up with that? So why is it that we couldn't do have more love for, why couldn't Disney love Power Rangers? And they say they were embarrassed by the namesake of this franchise. Oh, that's BS. I mean, original Saban cared about the franchise. Disney and even Neo Saban right now, I say that Disney is like Neo Saban. Well, but Disney is better, but Neo Saban, they just really had nothing going for them, basically. Even though they had something going for them, but it's just that Disney for some damn reason, they can put effort in a lot of good things better than what Neo Saban could do. But you see, Disney. The problem is that Disney didn't have freaking faith in Power Rangers. They really did not have faith in the franchise at all. They were so more about banking all their money on Marvel and Star Wars as of right now, but they couldn't bank on any of their money on the Power Rangers. Hence, that's why we had later seasons after SPD, starting with Mystic Force, we would have 32 episodes each year, and then also slicing the show's budget gets even worse. The budgeting of the show gets worse and worse, and it's not getting any better. And I'm like, screw you, Disney, because it's like, if you don't care about the franchise, then you know what? Then why did you even get Power Rangers then? And I get that why, I don't even want to go into further why Saban decided to, get away from Power Rangers. Get away from Power Rangers in favor of doing anything with some business ventures and politics and stuff during those remaining 7.5 years. So that is one of the damn reasons I didn't cared about Disney, what they did with Power Rangers, because what Disney did with Power Rangers was so frustrating to me. But admittedly though, in retrospect though, I still like some of the things Disney did with Power Rangers, but it's just, I just didn't care. With some of the things they did. And it's hard to say which one of these Disney seasons is my favorite now, in retrospect. Although, looking back in retrospect, some things that they did were good. Even though for those who, that are following that don't like RPM, I understand that RPM, there were some things that sucked. And even though to the fact that RPM, as great of a series it is by many of the 99% of the, fans, but there were some things that, why even, one of my fellow YouTubers, Rick, my favorite, YouTubers, Rick of the Onyx Tavern, has stated about his problems with RPM and why he never liked RPM. He never liked the referential humor. He didn't like the whole premise and concepting and all that stuff with Sentai and all that stuff, but I get it. But other than that, it's just Disney, I would say their era still holds up over Neo Saban any day. But it's just, however, some of the things that I've realized in retrospect what Disney did, they just never cared about Power Rangers. They never did. I wish they did when they had it. But right now, but look at them now. They can do so much better right now with Marvel and some degree with Star Wars. Take your pick with that. But really, they could have did so much more with Power Rangers. I mean, they did do some good stuff with Power Rangers. Even though aside from some things I didn't like, again, civilian powers, Cal explosions. What they did in RPM with the referential humor, like Cannon in the freezer and Green Ranger talent show thing, or Detonator Putty, that kind of thing. But, or all the stupid stuff that was in Operation Overdrive. So there you go. I was just like, okay, well, you know what, Disney? How about if you think Power Rangers should go fuck itself as soon as you, wanted to kill the franchise? You know what, Disney? From in the mid to late 2000s, how about you go fuck yourself? Because all that time you had Power Rangers during those 7 years, 15 years ago, since then, you could have did much more, like I said. You could have gave them a cinematic universe of films. You could have gave them all this interesting stuff in terms of, all these great things. Because it seems like it goes to show this is one of the reasons why the general public doesn't care about Power Rangers. It's just one of those franchises that's there in the background, was a thing, and it seems like they just don't really care. They just don't really care about the franchise, and they just want it to go away. So that's one of the reasons why I was like, that's one of the reasons why when I was when I was a teenager, I moved on from Power Rangers in favor of those things that I've mentioned. If you saw that video of mine earlier this month and a half that I said about when I was a teenager, when Disney had Power Rangers, I was on to Spider-Man and The Incredibles and Napoleon Dynamite and G.I. Joe, Michael Bay's Transformers and stuff during that time, and whatever for video games during the time before we got PS3 and stuff. But you see, that's one of the freaking reasons why I never did care for Disney's Power Rangers era, because I realized they had no freaking faith, and that's why for years, for 20 some years, I've been more of a fan of the original Saban shows than what we got of Power Rangers since when Disney had it up until right now, Neo Saban with Super Ninja Steel. So there's that. So those are somewhat of the thing this is somewhat that thing I had with the Disney era, and I had to get it off my chest if I could, because sitting around for this for 50 minutes was kind of worth my time, like I usually would when I would do 40 to 50 minute videos. Even though sometimes if I want to go on and drag on, I go on for long, but that's fine. That's how I do on these shows. But that's my thoughts on my feelings about the Disney era on its own as a video. Let me know what you guys think, and I'm off for now. Thanks for watching.